Okay, welcome to everyone who's tuning in. I'm just going to wait a few minutes before we kick off. So maybe if Carla, you wanted to kick off the MCC, well, what we're all about, and then I can intro the topic as people start tuning in.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thanks for joining us for this 5th episode. Sorry, excuse the pauses. If I press mute, Ross, you can take over. So we are MCC, Malta Creative Collective, and we're a creative network that's based in Malta. And when COVID-19 isn't happening, we usually meet on a monthly basis to discuss projects, collaboration, new ideas, and often invite other creatives or other individuals to chat about something that might help the creative industry, like intellectual property or pricing or anything in the broad spectrum of creativity. Today we have some fresh panelists joining us who will be talking about routine. And this is something that's really important. Okay, Rose, you go.
I will take over. So yes, we have 3 new speakers that have joined us for the 5th episode. And well, if you guys want to introduce yourselves very briefly and just go around and say a little bit about what it is that you, do, and so maybe Andrew, if you want to kick off.
Yeah, so obviously I'm one of the founders of fit-Tazza. We're an art studio. We also have the brand Souvenirs That Don't Suck that we manage now. And basically fit-Tazza was co-founded by Craig, McDonald and myself. And later on, Simon joined us to help us more with the numbers. And that's the 3 of us now that operate both brands in Malta. Well, we have some exciting projects, and we're also dealing with some exciting news, I guess, due to the situation we're in, right?
Awesome. And then we have 2 Emmas. So maybe Emma Hogg, do you want to kick off your little mini intro?
So hi, I'm Emma Hogg. I'm a psychotherapist, a lifestyle strategist, and I'm also the founder of A Life I Choose. A Life I Choose is a self-development agency, and all the work that we do is designed to empower people to boost their strengths, to amplify their strengths, so that they can overcome any challenge, no matter the circumstance, and that they can create a life on their terms, one that is fulfilling and satisfying and exciting and driven.
And Emma number 2?
Okay, so my intro is probably going to be a bit more brief, but I am an artist. I do like a mix of illustration and then also painting and printing. I kind of separate my work where I have some projects which are a bit more like slow and mindful, and then my illustration is a bit more instantaneous. And I recently started like a illustration, like ongoing project under the title Repos, which can be found on my website. Yeah.
Short and sweet. Awesome. So essentially the topic for this 5th episode for today is going to be exploring a little bit about the connection between, or the space between creativity and routine, and where these 2 meet, and the way in which having a structured approach or less of a structured approach to your creative workflow and your output, whether that affects your end results. And essentially, while not having any boundaries may fuel some of your more inspired creations and ideas, the question is, do we still need a level of certainty around some sort of a schedule to help ground our creativity, or do we revel a little bit more in having absolutely no boundaries, and where we might even get more of a creative sort of boost without sort of that much of a structure. So we're getting the question from very different perspective, obviously from a creative point of view, but not only. So we are going to kick off the first question with Emma Fsadni, who is the artist in the group. And so Emma, the question for you is, could you give us a little bit of an outline of your ordinary creative day, and how much of a routine it now embraces in light of what we're going through in the current extraordinary times?
Yeah, I mean, when I kind of was given this question, I sort of was thinking how I was going to answer it, because a lot of the creative side of the things I do are kind of, even if the final product is quite structured as a final outcome, the creative process is normally quite free-flowing, so I don't like to be too structured with my process. In saying that, I then try to implement sort of routines which come prior to my kind of creative process, which kind of help to facilitate my creative process. So kind of balancing out the uncertainty which comes when you're trying to produce something new, coming up with new ideas. It's all very kind of uncertain. And as you mentioned in the description of the event, like being creative is sort of linked to ideas of freedom, expression, and these sorts of things, which I agree with. So I feel like my actual creative process isn't that structured, but then I kind of implement certain routines prior. So I thought I would kind of go over a few of the things which kind of helped me kind of go into my creative process with quite a like flow state, so I don't feel like any resistance towards what I'm trying to work towards. So yeah, I feel like this is something which I kind of already implemented even before kind of everything escalated to what it is now. But yeah, and I also kind of want to just mention that obviously I don't have kids, and the work I was doing before this, I used to start quite late and end later in the day. So I had kind of mornings to myself. I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. But I feel like these are still things which one can implement if they want a bit more like something to ground themselves or also elevate themselves throughout their day. And especially if they're trying to pursue something on a creative note. So yeah, I feel like my morning is kind of when I try to sort of get what I want to get done for myself before going into like anything creative done. And it kind of starts actually the night before, in that I sort of set my intentions for the day. So for both from like a creative standpoint, but also just the things which I want to kind of get done, just so I have that sense of clarity when I wake up. I don't have to be thinking about that first thing in the morning. It's already sort of set. But again, I'm not the kind of person who's gonna like Google calendar things, because that almost makes me feel a bit anxious, because I feel like I have too much pressure then. So I set the intentions, I know what needs to be done, and I'm realistic. So if it's just a question of like, I know I need a certain time just to be thinking about an idea, I take that into consideration the night before. So yeah, then when I wake up, I normally kind of stay in bed just for a few minutes and tap into how I'm feeling and whatever. And I try to maybe write something down or read something. I think like writing down something, whether it's an idea, a thought, or just like whatever, or reading something new, is a really good way to kind of go away from a routine, in the sense that you're taking in something new or you're letting out something new. So it takes you away from like the autopilot side of routine, which I feel like if you're too much in like the autopilot state of routine where you're just going through one thing from another, that really interferes with one's creativity, because you're just like going through the motions without actually thinking about anything. So I think doing a small thing like that can really help just like start your day with some form of stimulation, but it's like a very gentle stimulation. You're not looking at your phone or like taking in like something like that. But anyway, then I kind of get up and I do some sort of workout. And I wanted to kind of include this because, I mean, obviously working out is something which is known to be good for like one's mood and everything. But specifically, I try to do like yoga and Pilates. And I find that the kind of flow of the movements, it engages you both physically, but even mentally. And the kind of flow in the movements really helps with the flow throughout the day. So if I don't get some sort of movement in the morning, I feel like things can't flow through me. So like even ideas, thoughts, and like even when I'm kind of going into something creative later in the day, if I haven't done some sort of movement, there's sort of a sense of resistance. Whereas if I've gotten some form of movement in the morning, it really helps things flow later on in the day. So although it makes you feel good in the moment, I think something like yoga, Pilates, or any form of movement that you feel like you want to do that day, I think it's really good to be in tune with your body. Kind of really helps later in the day. Like I'll be in my studio later in the day, and even when I go to pick up something, I kind of notice that motion more than I would have otherwise. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. Anyway, then I kind of just get ready. So I have a shower, I have breakfast, and I kind of make myself somewhat presentable for myself. And again, it goes back to this, it goes back to the idea of engagement. So I feel like if you engage with yourself in the morning, you give yourself the time, you just be more likely to be engaged throughout the day. And this helps with kind of creativity in the sense that when an idea will come to mind, you don't like push this, you just having a bit more of a slow and mindful approach in the morning helps you be more attentive and like, I don't know, it really helps me creatively speaking. Well, even non-creatively, but anyway. Yeah, then I kind of sort of reevaluate my intentions, which I would have set the night before. And then I kind of just ease into my day. So I go into whatever feels like the biggest priority or the thing I think needs the most time. But since I be like, I'm honest with myself. So if I know that maybe I have things which need to get done, which aren't creatively concerned, but I know they need to get done, I'll try to get that out of the way beforehand, or I'll schedule time for it later, but I know that I have that time. So when I do go into my creative state, it's like I'm not concerned about those things. So it's all about kind of getting yourself into a state where you can just flow then. So I don't know, everything I've mentioned might seem quite structured, but it's structured because then it allows me to flow when I'm in that creative state. I'm not like thinking about how I want to do this, whatever. Obviously these things like can be adapted to what one's priorities are in a day, but the main intention is that like you try to find things which make you feel good, so that then when you're going into whatever creative act, you feel kind of comfortable. But like comfortable in the sense, not comfortable like you've just eaten a bag of chocolate, but like comfortable like you feel ready. Yeah, but something I do kind of want to mention is that although I've listed all these things, I feel like it's not so much about having a strict routine or structure, but more like implementing certain habits and rituals which sort of energize you, but also make you feel grounded. So that well, if it might be the case that you can't do that in the morning, but you know you have these things to go back to. So if something doesn't go your way or whatever, you have that to kind of go back to, and kind of being adaptable, because obviously even like when you're doing things creatively, things aren't always going to work out how you're planning. Maybe a test doesn't go your way, and I feel like especially when you're kind of at a creative stage where you're just testing things out, things are uncertain, having these things to fall back on like helps, because I don't know, it just like, I don't know if this is making sense, but yeah.
Makes total sense.
I'm trying to think if there's like something specific which I wanted to mention, which I'm leaving out because I'm sure there is. But yeah, I think the main thing is these are all kind of like frameworks, but they're not like strict regimens. I have been like there have been stages in my life where I've stuck to routine too much, and going back to the idea of autopilot, I think if you're constantly just kind of taking things off, you're not creating any space for creativity. So like I mentioned the idea of yoga and Pilates, because although they're kind of exercise and movement, I find, for example, if I do something a bit more where it requires a bit more tension and things like that, I'm actually kind of going against like letting creativity in, because it doesn't let things flow, if you know what I mean. So it's all about kind of creating space and facilitating your creativity. Fine, and this will be different for everyone. It might be a walk outside. It might be, you know, and just about finding what works for you, and then kind of trying to find the time and space for that to help the creative process. Because I mean, it's different for everyone, but I feel like even if the final outcome of one's creative work is structured and, you know, they know what they're doing from the beginning, even just the idea for that to come about has to come through some sort of flow. It has to come organically. Yeah. I don't. I don't know if there's anything someone wants to add or ask or whatever.
The routine that you described in your everyday, was this something that you, have you changed it with the sort of advent of the current pandemic or sort of self-isolation arrangements that we are currently experiencing, or has it always been your general everyday setup?
I think before, as I said, the work I used to start quite late, so I did have time in the morning to do these kind of things. That being said, I would also want to try and get some creativity in before I would go to work as well. So like trying to do all this with creativity, I feel like prior to this, I would kind of be a bit going through the motions and not being as mindful. But now I feel like, especially in the morning when I'm in bed, I kind of tune in. So I try to give myself the time to notice what I actually need and want. And I feel like having that sensitivity in the morning towards myself, then it's like, because I've given that time, I can approach everything else later in the day with that same sensitivity. So I think really, like, I know people have been saying like everything's slowing down a lot because of what's happening. And that is true. I try to be quite slow in the sense, anyway, because I think even like certain movements and like thoughts, if you don't rush through them, you can, you know, you might feel like you're being a bit slower in the sense that things aren't going, materializing at such a speed that things around us seem to always be going so fast. You might feel like you have to catch up, but I think in the long run, anytime I've ever taken, like done things a bit slower, a bit more mindfully, it's always kind of worked out better in the long run. So I think just approaching things from a very slow approach. And also, obviously, like now my mom, for instance, she's normally always at work, and my sister's home as well. So like even like making the time for them as well, and like spending more time with my cat and things like that. Like these are things which, although everything I'm mentioning is not necessarily tied to creativity, giving time for these things will kind of energize you, so that then when you do go towards your whatever creative thing you want to be pursuing, you just kind of feel better. I don't know, like there's no point in like putting too much pressure on yourself. I think if you think about it, if you go through the list of things you want to do in a day and you take away the concept of pressure to all of those things, the approach you're going to take towards doing them is going to be so much better, and you'll actually be more likely to enjoy the process. But not only that, like you'll get through that list probably easier, because certainly easier, because you just remove this feeling of stress around it. But yeah.
Would you say that your creativity has sort of, would you say it's been increased, or you haven't really felt a change, or what sort of on your creative mojo?
Yeah, I think like every day is different, so it goes through waves. In my case, I have like a project which I had already started working on before this kind of escalated, but it was much more in the at its conceptual stages, so it wasn't like really visually materializing. And throughout this time, I mean, I'm kind of lucky in the sense that I have this time to really dedicate to it. I've kind of seen it unravel. So from like more of like an analytical side, now coming more into a visual and experimentation, testing, stuff like that. So I don't know. I think it's really allowed me to do things at the pace I like, which is quite a privilege. But in saying that, I think I really have had to kind of implement going away from my work, because I think since I do have the luxury that I can now, like being in my own space, I can always go to it. Sometimes it being right there, it's like you almost have to remove yourself from the creativity and the creative process, because if you're too much in it, you don't see things anymore. So kind of making myself, I don't know, not making myself, I enjoy going for a walk, but like kind of moving myself away from the work and then revisiting it has been something which I've like consciously had to implement, because I don't know, it's just, if I'm in it too much, it's like I can't see a way, like I can't get another perspective. So kind of moving away and then going back to it has really had to refresh my mindset towards the work. So that is what's coming to mind right now. But yeah.
Cool. Back to what you mentioned about stress as well, Emma. I find personally, I find that when you approach a project under a lot of pressure, or put yourself under a lot of pressure and stress, then it takes you a lot longer, because you often either get a creative block or you have to redo work because maybe it's done carelessly or not neat enough or something.
Exactly, sort of. Like carelessly, like in the sense, I mean, I've been like someone who's done this once or twice, like especially during my studies. You might think like, oh, I just want to get this done, so it's just done, and that pressure is like removed off you. But if you kind of rush something and you're not satisfied, it's gonna turn out worse, and then you're gonna anyway have to probably repeat the process. And also, if you put any form of pressure around anything you want to achieve, whether creative or not, you're gonna create a sense of resistance towards it. So the likeliness of even like getting yourself to actually start, because it always, you know, it always starts with just doing it, you know, starting something. So if you if you work it up so much, you're gonna make it seem so unapproachable. So all of these steps which I take prior to my creative process are like, it just makes everything a lot more approachable for me. So I can like go into whatever I want to go into with like the want to go into it. So yeah, making things like a want rather than like a feel of need, or like, you know.
Interesting.
But, yeah.
Do you want to go on to the second question, Carla?
So, question is for Emma Hogg, and it's also about routine and whether this for you is a choice or a necessity in your days.
Okay, so I found your question really interesting, and I gave it some thought, and I really enjoyed listening to Emma, because I think that we think very similarly about this. So I'm going to be building upon so I'm going to be building upon what Emma spoke about from a different angle, kind of thing. So so if you think about kids, right? Kids do really well with routine. It brings certainty, safety, regularity. You know, routine is a repeated set of behaviors. It's habits, and our habits make us. So kids do really well with routine. At the same time, we know that kids don't do well when they don't have autonomy, when they don't have freedom. They start to struggle when everything is pre-decided for them. And we're the same. You know, we need to have certainty. It's one of our fundamental human needs. And we also need variety. because variety brings novelty, and novelty brings new neural connections, and from new neural connections we see things differently. That's where creativity comes from. So if you ask me, you know, is routine a necessity or a choice? It's absolutely a necessity. What we have choice over is the quality of the routine that we create. Because you can create, and Emma, you touched on this, you can create a routine that is painful, you know, or you can create a routine that doesn't serve your outcome and who you want to be and the kind of emotional state that you want to be in. So, so our choice is always over, you know, what's the quality of routine that I want to create. And creating a routine is really an opportunity to design your life. It's to design your life to serve you, to, you know, be the best version of yourself, as cheesy as that sounds, to be your best, basically, to put your best foot forward into the world. So when you go about designing your routine, it's important to ask yourself, what's your outcome? And in fact, Emma does this the night before, where she says, okay, what are my intentions for the next day? And you can do this at the beginning of your week, you can do this at the beginning of your day. And basically you can kind of create an outcome that is something like, I want to have a week in which I'm super focused, I'm majorly creative, I connect with my loved ones, and I feel healthy. So you're not focusing specifically on the tasks that you need to get done, but you're focusing on the state that you want to be in, because your state comes first. The tasks come afterwards. If you're in a positive, emotional, and healthy state, you can do what you need to do because you're energetic, you know, you can think clearly, and then the task can come later. So you ask yourself, okay, what's my outcome for this week? So my outcome is, you know, I want to be creative, I want to be focused, I want to stay connected to my loved ones and be very alive and engaged in those relationships. And I want to be healthy. And then it's important that you ask yourself why. Like, why does that even matter? Why does it matter that I'm my most creative, my most focused? Why does it matter that I'm healthy? Because the truth is, like, there are going to be times when you'd rather sit down and watch Netflix. Or there are going to be times when you'd rather like order a pizza than cook, or you'd love to de-stress by pounding a bottle of wine, you know? So you need to know why. Why does it matter? So, you know, you want to be your most creative because you want to deliver the best value possible to your clients. You want to really meet their needs. You want to enjoy the creative process. You want to feel proud of yourself. Why do you want to be healthy? You want to be healthy because that's where your energy comes from, you know, when you feel good, you look good, you do good, you create well, you know. So that's why. Why do you want to be connected to your loved ones? Because the quality of our relationships is the quality of our life, you know, and when you feel connected and you're engaged, you feel full, that contributes to everything. Emma, you touched on this too. You were saying, you know, you leave space for connection.
It's all about space.
Exactly.
Like, so, in all aspects, I think, like creatively.
So once you...
Okay, yeah.
Should I go? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
It's so just my connection is a bit, okay.
So once you've defined your outcome and then you know your why, you know why, like you've got your fuel, then you go to your how, and that's when you create your routine, you create your strategy. So you say, okay, like, what do I need to implement? What rituals or actions do I need to take this week to meet my outcome? To meet my outcome of, you know, being my most creative, my most focused, my healthiest, and in touch with my loved ones. And then you might say, okay, to meet my health needs, I'm going to do yoga 4 times a week in the mornings. And then I'm going to go for a walk at the end of the day to mark the end of the day 3 times a week. And to meet my connection needs, I'm gonna go for this walk with my husband or with my kids or with a friend. And to meet your creativity and focus needs, you might say, okay, I'm gonna do like a short meditation before I start this section of work. And what you can do is you create these chunks where you ask yourself, okay, what role do I need to be in to meet this objective. So for example, you might need to do some administrative tasks, which are not particularly creative, but there's stuff that you need to do. You know, it's the less fun stuff like emails or accounts or whatever. So maybe you put aside a chunk of time, you know, 2 hours on a Monday morning, or maybe you leave it till Friday afternoon, you know, you don't want to start your week like that. I don't think any of us here are accountants. But, you know, and you go into that role of like administrator or, you know, money magnet, or like you're doing client love or whatever, like kind of, I always give them funky titles because I want to juice it up. I want to keep myself interested. But anyway, you put aside that time. And then, for example, you know, Monday afternoon, you're writing or you're painting or whatever you're doing. And the chunks mean that you have specific time allocated for that task. And, you know, if I'm writing, I'm not going to be checking email. If I'm writing, I'm not going to be looking at my WhatsApp messages because that's totally going to interrupt my flow. And it also gives me a sense of, okay, if I'm writing, then I know that I need at least an hour and a half, because 20 minutes isn't enough for me to let go and experiment and flow. But, you know, if I give myself 5 hours, I'm going to spend 3 of them on Pinterest. So, you know, you kind of, you chunk, you chunk to support yourself. So basically the routine, the way I see it is, the routine is there to give you that certainty. It is to support you to produce at your best. And it gives you that structure to be able to let go so that you can be in the state of flow. It gives you the structure so that you can go into freedom. And Emma, you mentioned something super interesting. You spoke about stress and you spoke about pressure. And there is, on a brain level, what's happening when we create a routine that doesn't feel good. So either we're doing work that doesn't fill us up, or we're going from one task to the other, to the other. What happens is that we're so much in fight or flight because it's so stressful that less oxygen gets to our prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the area of the brain that's responsible for creativity, because it's responsible for integration. It takes all parts, all information from all different parts of the brain, and it integrates it. It makes sense of it. If that part of your brain isn't working, you can't produce your best work. So the routine sets you up. Sorry?
No, I was just going to say, that's why like slowing down, like people say, oh, I need to slow down. Like, because when you slow down, you have the mental clarity to like do these things. Like if you're just going from one thing to the other, you're never going to have the space for ideas to come in and whatnot. Exactly.
It literally won't turn on for you. So you won't be able to come up with your best work. You're going to be functioning from survival mode. And in fact, what's happening lately is that a lot of people are making decisions from survival mode. You see this with a lot of financial decisions and whatever, like people, when they're making it from survival mode, they go into greed typically. So it's very interesting to see, and we do this with time and with energy as well when we're in survival mode. So it's very, very important that we support ourselves to step out of survival mode, to go into a more creative, spiritually aligned, you can call it anything you want, flow state.
It's very, very interesting. And as you were talking, Emma, the question that sprung to mind is, can there be, I mean, I agree with you that definitely the quality of routine is very important and something which we consciously need to decide. But do you think there can be too much of a routine, even when we step up and say, okay, I want it to be of an excellent quality that matches my creative needs and my family needs and my spirit and my physical needs? Is there something with having too much of a routine?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. And in fact, I used to struggle with this a lot. Like, I'm a person who likes rules. And my husband makes fun of me all the time because my husband hates rules. So we clash. I used to plan my days to the minute, like, it was doom, 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 doom. But when you function like that, you start to resist it because there's no space, you start to resent your own routine, you know, and you can love your work, but if you have no freedom, you know, it's not gonna, you're not gonna be able to give the best. So this was something I needed to learn, to leave space within the routine, to leave space for the stuff that crops up unexpectedly, to leave space to go and hang out with my nieces, to go and see my friends, to go for a walk with my husband, you know, to bake cookies, like, you know, like just this kind of stuff, like it needs to be there. And Emma said something earlier where she said, you know, these other things, you said something along the lines of they contribute to your creativity. You know, they enrich it. And I agree with that.
I mean, when I was younger, I used to be the kind of person who, like, routine wasn't a thing to me. And then because of my studies, I had to like just implement routine just to kind of survive. But it got to a point, like you're saying, where it was like, I just relied on it too much that, number one, I didn't know anything else. And I just wasn't enjoying anything. So yeah, that's why I find the topic of routine so interesting, because I went through a stage where I like relied on it too much, and then because of that, I like hated any routine, and I was like leaving my days completely free. And I mean, at the time I probably needed that, but at the same time I was like not accomplishing anything, both like in terms of work, but also just like, you know, spending time with people, whatever, because I was never like making a plan, so to speak. So I think it's kind of finding that balance, and I know that the word balance is thrown around so much, but like just finding what works for you, really. Like, you know, maybe just having a coffee in the morning is enough for you to get going.
Yeah,
like it's about establishing what works for you, and like owning that.
Exactly. It's so individual. And also something that I liked about what you said earlier is this tuning in, right? This mindfulness of where am I? Because, you know, we design our lives so that we can function at our best and, you know, be our most compassionate, be our most creative, be our most loving, be our most engaged. You know, if you want a high quality of life, this doesn't just happen. You have to design it, you have to choose it, and you have to take action towards creating it. You want to make lots of money, you have to plan that shit out. You know what I mean? Things don't just fall in your lap. So and obviously I'm using money as an excuse. It's even a high quality of a relationship, a sexual relationship, anything. You need to put energy into it. You need to think it out. At the same time, I think it's really important, you know, Emma said you need to tune in. A routine that we made, you know, 4 months ago might no longer be relevant now. It might actually be working against us, you know. And, you know, even sometimes, you know, a routine that worked last week or that worked yesterday might not work today. Like, so we do need to tune in and use. The best thing about a schedule is that you can reschedule, right? You want the routine to serve you and not the other way around.
Yeah. And on this note, I remember the first time I started planning stuff, I was reading something and I was going on from a full-time to freelance, and I was reading this book and it said like you need to schedule so that you actually can plan and have more free time. And I'm like, I always thought that you plan so that everything is, you know, straightforward and you don't. And then I tried this because I really like, I was like, no, this is not right. And all of a sudden, I started changing meetings that I had scheduled, and I was being more efficient with my day. I knew what was coming Friday, so I could do it Monday and avoid having to do the same thing on Monday and on Friday. And all of a sudden, I was like, I had more time on my hands. I was able to enjoy life a bit more. I was able to have time, like, to work with Craig to launch the fit-Tazza. So it was. But I remember the first time I read it, I was like, what do you mean you plan so that you have more time to reschedule and flexibility? That was it. Like, you plan so that you have more flexibility with your time.
Exactly. It frees you up. It frees up your decision making. Like, if you have no plan, then you're constantly decision making. And this actually wears out your prefrontal cortex. Yeah. So if you have a plan and you have a sense, you know what's happening. Even if you don't meet it, but let's say you left out a chunk, you didn't manage to do the chunk on your Monday afternoon, you can reschedule that, you can move it, you know. It takes away that having to think about 7 different things at once. You can just focus on that thing and you can engage with it fully and flow.
And when you use technology, like for example, just silly functionalities like recurring event, for example, you know, like I know that every 3 months we need to meet, even if we're super busy, just to discuss the last 3 months and where we're heading, just to make sure we're still focused. I don't need to worry about organizing it, you know, it's just there. Just my calendar is going to remind me, listen, time to prepare the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I know that next week I'm going to have the meeting, and it became second nature. I think everything we do, we always try to do it. Like when we did our first exhibition, we made sure that the next exhibition of that scale becomes a lot easier or takes half the time, you know? So it's the same way as we use technology to structure our days. We also use what we're doing to structure them for the next time as well. So we document everything. Like we've never worked on a project, and you come to do a next project and we're like, okay, what did we do? You know, like our task list, our past calendars, our previous meetings, they're all there organized. So we're not starting from scratch. And that again gives you that structure, allows you to next time be a lot more creative in working on a bigger project, because you're not wasting time trying to understand how you're going to light up the pieces, because you have everything recorded, quotes, you know who to work with. And if you're not structured during those events, the next time around you're going to be stuck starting again. Okay, I think I have a quote, or what was it, who was that guy, or you know. So that helps us as well to be a bit more creative. Maybe it's not routine, but it's also a routine in a larger scale or in a bigger outcome.
Also, I just wanted to mention, because you were talking about the tuning in, Emma, just like for people who maybe are not one to always like tune in with how they're feeling or what they think they need or just whatever, they just like to go through the motions so they don't actually have to think about their reality. It can be like confronting in the beginning, because if you've been putting things aside, you know, when you finally address them, it's going to be a bit confronting. But the more you kind of make an effort to tune in, like in the long run, it's going to help you. So
the easier
sometimes
it becomes.
sometimes like dealing with that like discomfort in the beginning can like help you in the long run. So
totally,
don't be afraid.
Totally. I think that's good advice for many people at the moment, you know, kind of being in lockdown and having more time with themselves. I don't think everyone,
I know,
you know,
like, I think that's probably like, I mean, okay, everything that's happening is already just like unsettling, but I think some people might feel even more unsettled because they actually have to sit with themselves for the
it's not
first
easy.
time in a while.
Yeah.
But
with no distractions and no events to run off to, and you know, no deadlines to push to get to, and there is a lot of, you know, people think, oh, I've got nothing to do, but actually there's so much to do, which is just sitting there and actually looking inwards, which is, this is the best opportunity we have to do that. And what you say, Emma, about tuning in is I think the cornerstone to all our lives, not just if you're a creative. I think in general, whatever you do, if you're in tune with yourself, everything flows from there very naturally, and there is no need to sort of sit there and panic if you're not following a routine, because you'll know that you're in flow and you're sort of resonating with what you've tuned into. So it is you adapt around the changed routine. So I agree with you. I think the most important thing to use this time, especially to tune in and to look inwards, whether you are creative or not. Carla, did you want to add anything in the meanwhile? Because I know you've been busy feeding and having little O's lunch. Dinner.
Yeah, I'm just listening in. I have nothing to add.
Cool.
I'm taking notes though. I'm definitely someone who sometimes, or well, who used to, I don't think anymore, would overschedule things, and then I'd get so worked up about things that might not go according to a schedule. And I think my routine with the studio, once I had Olivia, was very difficult for me to understand that it had to change, and I couldn't stick to my, you know, morning exercise followed by my emails, followed by studio work, whatever. And yeah, it took months to adjust to a new routine. I still have moments where I find it difficult to readjust because I really like routine. So sometimes having to sit down and reschedule it is quite an overwhelming task, and I'm learning how to not get too worked up about it and go a bit more with the flow. Because once you get into a routine and you enjoy it, then and you're in a flow of a routine. And as you said, you know, if you have things written down, you can reschedule those few meetings or whatever. But when you have to start it from scratch, I find that quite difficult, because then you feel like it's blocking your creativity or blocking scheduled time when everyone else is available to email or talk. So you just have to figure out I'm still at that step, I think.
I feel sometimes when that happens, Carla, I feel bad that maybe the new routine is actually a step backwards rather than forward, when in reality it's just adapting to what I need just the same. So that's my biggest challenge, I think, when it comes to changing a routine from just, even if I wake up and I train and now I'm training in the evening, you know, I'm like, is it an excuse so I don't train? Is this what I need? Is my day better if I train in the morning? But at the end I say I need to change it because that's where I am right now, right? And if I keep, as Emma said, physically fit and I'm giving time for me to train, maybe not in the morning, it's not a big deal how I do it, but I'm doing it. But for me, because I like to have everything scheduled, that is it, because I'm doing it, you know. So that was a challenge, or it still is, to be fair. It's just I'm not changing my routine now. I just adjusted to this working from home, everything closed routine. So
but do you not feel like you need to know those things a day in advance, or are you quite comfortable rescheduling within your day?
Like when I think when I'm fully focused in and being the most productive, usually I have an idea that my 2 weeks calendar knows what I'm going to be working on, and usually they're bigger tasks, so they're not very specific. They're not every 15 minutes, but I would know that I have a day on this, a day of this. I can plan accordingly. That's usually when we're working on something which has less deadlines and it's a bit more creative. The moment that we go, like the new shop, for example, that's day to day. And that I find hard when I'm working day to day, from day to day, or the next 3 days, and my calendar next week is completely empty. That stresses me out, because if I change something today, I'm not sure how it's going to affect me next week. So that puts me a bit anxious. If I know my time next week, even if it's just a general overview, then rescheduling on a daily basis is okay, because I know where I stand. So it depends, but I wouldn't know where I stand if I'm really busy. So that kind of works against each other sometimes. That's where I get stressed, to be fair, because I don't know what's coming and I need to reschedule what I have because of something that I wasn't planning, obviously. That's my biggest challenge.
I like how you mentioned, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I like how he mentioned when they have a bit less going on, how the way he schedules would be like maybe half the day rather than 15 minutes this, 15 minutes that. And I find, especially like from a creative standpoint, now I'm saying not like just daily tasks. When I do kind of go into like, say I know I've dedicated this time to creativity, I try to actually kind of, if I'm in a position where I can do, like completely forget the concept of time. So I know I have this time, but then like I'll leave my phone, or like I'll cover the time on my laptop if I have it in with me. just because I sometimes find if I know the time, it influences me to like, I don't know, go against the intuition I would be feeling in that moment. So I might feel like, oh shit, it's lunchtime, let me go have lunch. If I don't actually know the time, I'm actually in this process. Like I can actually immerse myself in the process more when I don't know the time. Obviously, one isn't always in this, like, one doesn't always have that, like, or just forget the concept of time. But even if you go in the evening, maybe to do some creative work, you know, I find that like if I put any device or whatever that tells me the time away, I'll go back, like say I go in the evening, and then like when I'm getting ready to stop, I'll go into the kitchen, maybe get some water before I go to bed, and I look at the time and I would be like, wow, if this was just like a regular day and I was looking at the time and whatever, I probably would have been like, oh, I'm tired, or oh, I need a snack or whatever. But like, because you remove that influence of just numbers, I don't know, sometimes I find that from a creative standpoint, it really helps to get in the flow. So that's more like creative work.
We organize our days so that we make sure, like for example, now we're building a new shop in Valletta. The new shop started in 2018. We knew that in 2019 we needed to look for a new shop. In 2019, in January, we started our research, our discussions for visual merge, the concept of the shop, the materials we want to explore, the local relationship, the brand. And there, although we were busy with other stuff, we were just scheduling time, even if sometimes, as you said, in the evening, we're like, listen, at 4 we're gonna stop, and we know that this might happen in a year and a half, but we need to start discussing now. And over there, time becomes irrelevant, even if we're having a bad day and we need to reschedule. But if you don't plan that far in advance, you'll come in, you want to open in 2 months, and that's where you don't have time for your creative process. That's where you don't have time for research, you don't have time for samples, for testing, for discussions. So for us, as I mentioned last time when we were having a chat, maybe it's easier because we're 3 of us. So our biggest challenge is but our biggest challenge is more communicating between us, and our personal routines get the best out of us when we're a team. So that is the challenge that all of us as individuals have the responsibility to take care of. But when we're together, then we all know our roles, and for us it's very easy to push or have Craig push us when there's something creative and there's something maybe aesthetically we need him to lead. But at the same time, knowing that we have someone who's specifically designed to take care of the admin, the accounting, the financing of a project. Like when Craig and I started, we never dreamt of jumping on projects like we did with the new shop, for example, you know, like the kind of projects that I like, that they kind of take a life of their own, you know. You start by planning them in the future, then there's traction, and you keep just fueling, and there's no pressure until the pressure comes that it's actually happening. And then we kind of switch mode where the creative stops and we need to respect that we did our best thinking, and now it's not the time to start discussing of changing complete materials, for example, or if there's a problem, it can't be that a problem has a solution that's not derived from what we've been discussing for months. And that's where trusting your process, like Simon can't be creative applying for BOV loan, regardless of how creative we want to be as an art studio, it's never going to happen. So when those things come, we need to be super sharp, but we have someone that is an expert, or his best role is that. Same as when Craig is designing a new collection. Like if Craig is super stressed that, you know, like now it's not the right time to sit down and even start discussing, we're not gonna plan a new collection. It's a non-starter, you know. There's also, like for example, during this time, the shop ended up, instead of opening in May, we're gonna open in hopefully June. In the meantime, there was opportunities for us to do some creative, and both brands, we did a collaboration with Malta Type on a very small scale, and we did a collaboration with Love in Malta, again on a small scale. But in the whole picture, we see those as kind of testing our creative process, that when it's bounded by time, risk, and maybe there's an opportunity, how quick can we react to get that opportunity? But we accept the fact that our resources are not limited, and we can't be too ambitious, you know, because ambitious sometimes it's can hurt you, because you miss the deadlines, you're aiming too far, you're not taking care of yourself. So that's something I do. For example, I know when we're building something like the new shop, I'm work, you know, like I know that it's temporary, I know that it's not gonna last more than a month, and that's where I can focus, because there's no way now I'm gonna go on a Saturday, chill at the beach, and I'm not thinking about work. Like, I know me, but I know it's temporary, and I know that it's not sustainable. So the moment that we open the new shop, that's where now back to, you know, maybe starting work a bit late. No way, maybe we go weekends, you know, unless it's desperately needed. So there's those ways. And
you mentioned, no, I was just going to follow up on this thing which you're saying of the temporary. I think that's another thing to take into consideration. So when I was explaining my routine, so to speak, in the beginning, that's like an ideal day. But there will be times when you completely have to put all of that aside. And sometimes in the long run, that would be, not in the long run, like in that moment, that's more beneficial, because if you're, I don't know, if you're trying to do yoga and you know you have a meeting in 5 minutes, it's not going to be of benefit. Like, so, you know.
Yeah, and what Emma Hogg mentioned regarding good and bad habits, I find it that when I'm super, like, really working hard and maybe tasks are never endless, that's where I kind of allow some bad habits to come in, you know, which it might be counterproductive, but that's where I relax a bit, and I'm not super regimental about maybe if I need to sleep for an extra hour instead of waking up and doing an hour of training. Like, I give myself that. But when I have no reason to do it, then there's no reason why to miss on the good habits. Even with food, for example, like, I notice that the moment I'm too stressed, my appetite goes down, don't feel like spending an hour cooking, so my eating habits go a bit down. But I know that when I get out of the cycle, I love cooking, I'll get back to the kitchen, and that's where I relax, you know. So again, this is like what I was mentioning to Carla about changing the schedule. These are the things where I'm not sure if when I'm stressed is the time to actually put more effort to keep the good habits going.
Well, sometimes a good habit can become a bad habit, right? Like, if what you need is rest, but you're pushing yourself to work out at the same level that you were before, you're not allowing your body to recover.
Yeah, true.
You know,
true.
You're not letting your mind to recover. You're not allowing your mind to integrate. So yeah, it's good awareness, it's good insight.
Yes, actually, I've never looked at it like
Really?
the good habit the actual good habit at that time might not be the
Yeah, sometimes you have to order pizza, like, you know, it's like you can't always be on it. It's impossible.
I think the only time, like, one shouldn't give in is like when they literally know what they're about to do is like gonna cause them then like extra stress the next day, sort of. Like, I don't know if you
What's
know
that?
as in like, for example, it makes sense to rest more if you're feeling tired. That I agree with. But then, like, I don't know, let's say you're lactose intolerant and you eat a tub of ice cream. That's probably not a good choice.
That's when a bad habit stays a bad habit.
Yeah. But yeah.
Just taking a little bit back to Andrew, because I'm conscious of time and we just wanted to close off the questions before we open up the floor if anyone has any questions to add on the Facebook live stream. So Andrew, you touched upon briefly sort of what you and the team have been working on during sort of, the pandemic lockdown arrangements. Would you say that as a team, the creative spirit has increased, decreased, or has sort of stayed the same? I mean, how would you say, I mean, looking back to when all this kicked off in March, we've almost sort of hit the 2-month mark now. Looking back to when this all started, how would you say this has impacted the creative spirit of the team as a whole?
I think when it all started and we had to close the shop, I think we were quite in a shock. Obviously, we just signed a new shop, so we were kind of, this was the total opposite of what we wanted to happen, right? So I think at that point is where we realized that, listen, let's meet and let's stick to our process in terms of trusting what we've been doing and what got us here. And at that point, I could see that we were really going through things with a clear mind. That is where the collaboration with Malta Type, the idea came about. So I think at one point I was very happy how we turned things around, and we didn't let the new shop stress us. We kind of understood the new role of the new shop, extending the deadlines. We didn't need it in May anyway. So there was that process. I think once the actual work on the new shop started is where everything, like we're really busy right now because there's so much happening. So right now we're at that stage, even with or without the pandemic. Right now we wouldn't be creative. Like right now, literally, one day we might be painting, the next day we might be discussing something that we need to do, so it's really, we're quite autopilot right now. But we can see the end of the works for the new shop, and it's about to be ready, and we start getting it ready for the shop. So we already feel the need that, listen, like next week, hopefully we'll find some time where we're together. Maybe let's change a bit the environment. Like we've been meeting through Skype, we met at the shop. Now maybe we'll try to enjoy a bit the nice weather and some nature, so that we start thinking of the situation more clearly and look forward. So we went from stages of being a bit in panic to actually finding some time that we knew we had some collaborations, and we tested our process. And I'm very happy that although everything was happening around us, we stuck to our process. We had some creative sessions with Love in Malta. We had an old discussion with Malta Type that we found ways to make it happen earlier, because we knew that now there's so many things going to happen probably in December that kind of the year changed for us, so we didn't want to lose. So that I'm very happy. Now we're at this stage where we don't have time for it, but also we need to change that to another. I feel with the pandemic, we went from planning for 6 months, a year, and 2 years, right? So we have all those cycles in terms of collections. Like we had our Series 3 collection planned for 2021. We've been working on it for 2 years, research, planning. The new shop, you can say, is a test for what we want to do for Series 3. So all the suppliers we've met, all the suppliers we've done, all the materials we've used, it was all a learning process to the new collection. But now I think surviving with 2 shops is more important than that collection, or we find ways how to integrate them together. But we're no longer planning for the next 6 months or for a year. Now we need to plan for the next 2 months and the next 5 months,
So in that way, your routine has changed quite suddenly in certain ways compared to 2 months ago.
Yes, I mean, right now, in terms of routine at work, we're at the macro level of routine. All the micro level routine, we had meetings, for example, weekly to go through the calendars. We had people at the office and working, like that all changed. Like now it's a new way of meeting, Skype, following up. I still think like when we're gonna meet, we need to find ways to create that environment, even if we go, you know, to the beach or to a spot in Manuel Island, just to clear and change the. Obviously, we're three people, so we're still legally. So that at least you change that Zoom environment and you change a bit. You see real people, you know. It's so that's definitely, our routine definitely changed. We need to find what our next new routine is, but there's so many variables right now that I feel like we're still in the research mode to actually find a new routine right now.
Interesting. The two Emmas, did you have anything to add before we wrap up for today?
No, I'm good. I feel it was a really interesting discussion.
I think one thing, just extending off what he was saying about changing environment, I mean, this doesn't have so much to do about routine specifically, but I think, especially for people who don't work from home or aren't used to being at home so much, like making the conscious effort to go for like a walk, even just around your village, will make such a difference, just because number one, you're getting in fresh air, but like, I think people forget that even just the simple transitions in a day, like just driving to work or walking into work, makes such a difference like on your like being. So like something which I don't want to call it part of my routine, because it's something I want to do, and it's not like I plan it, it's just something which I kind of approach from more of an intuitive side. Like when I feel the need to like go outside, I will like go for a walk or something like that. And yeah, I mean, I just thought I would add that in.
No, I like what you said, Emma. I think it's the intuitive part of the routine that you refer to is really important. So not to sort of, if within you feel the need to sort of break away from the schedule that you've put yourself up for, to actually follow that, rather than forcing yourself to do something which you've scheduled but then might not be as productive or as creative as actually following your instinct and saying, you know what, I'm just going to go for a 15-minute walk around the block and come back feeling much more refreshed and ready to create.
It makes such a difference.
Definitely. Carla, I know you've been on mute for a little bit, but did you want to add anything before we sign off?
Good, guys. Super interesting. Thank you.
I think we've lost.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah.
Technology is not on our side today. Oh, there you are.
Hi. This is my internet.
Yeah. I think you were thanking us, Carla.
Thanking you. And I'm sure, oh, every time I unmute, something happens. When I'm on mute, everything's very peaceful. Yeah, just thanks for giving us some tips. I'm sure a lot of people took some good pointers from that. There you go. We're just learning how to put on trousers over here.
Me too.
I'm gonna mute myself.
Well, I'm gonna just resonate with what Carla was saying, and definitely it's been a short chat, but I've taken away so much from all of this, and even just hearing all of you and sort of listening it from different perspectives. Very, very. I mean, the word inspiring gets used 100 million times a day, but it really is, because you just feel like you get a glimpse into how everyone else is doing it, and you realize, okay, so it doesn't all have to look the same. And this is where I think is the most important part and takeaway to take from this, is that whoever comes up to you and says, you know, my routine is that I wake up at 5 and I meditate, and then I go and do it, you know, an ice cold shower, and then I have like 12 coffees.
I do have ice cold shower. It really helps with circulation.
I wasn't referring to you, Emma, for this specific point. In general, I mean, it's great, and I think the most important thing to realize is that whatever works for you is fine. I mean, there is no one way to do anything. There's no one way to do life. So there's no one way to have a routine that impacts your creativity in the best possible way. I think that's what we should all kind of remember when we're having our meltdown moments, where we're thinking, I scheduled all of this great stuff and it's not happening. So you feel like you haven't accomplished as much as you would have liked to, and perhaps feel that you failed in some ways. But in reality, as one of us mentioned, as one of you mentioned, somewhere in between all of this, it's actually maybe if you're stepping away from that original routine, you're actually maybe gaining a whole different perspective and actually increasing your creative spirit. So it's not actually that a bad thing to move away from a scheduled routine to something totally different. I'm just going to very quickly peek at the Facebook comments to see if we have any questions, but I don't think so. We just have some feedback. So I will say we should wrap this up, and to thank all of you again for your contribution and your insights. Apologies, we had a little bit of a technical drama at the beginning of all of this because the live streaming wasn't collaborating, so we managed in the end. But this recording will go up on the page as well and on the YouTube channel, which we'll link up tomorrow. So for those of you who didn't get the first part or the first 10 minutes of this, we'll be sharing that on all the channels. And for anyone who has any questions that would like to sort of throw them our way or to the panelists, please do. And we shall be scheduling another one of these webinars. And if anyone has any suggestions as to upcoming topics that they'd like to contribute to or to become a panelist of, please let us know and drop us a line. Carla, I see that you've unmuted, so if you want to add any last few words, and then we can close off the...
I know we don't have much time because we're a bit over, but before we close this off, anyone who knows Rosella, I mean, she's like the most organized person I've ever met in my life.
I know, we didn't even ask you about your routine.
So, any tips and tricks over there about your routine, Ross?
I'm still not. Honestly, I like to try and be, but ultimately it's never as much as I'd like to. No, what Emma was saying as well earlier, you set up an idea of how you'd like your day to look like, but then, you know, how do you plan every single moment? You can't, and you really shouldn't. And I find that when the sort of unexpected things pop up, it's when the magic happens. I mean, a lot of things, I look back in my life at the parts where I hadn't planned, is when the best stuff happened, honestly. I mean, okay, yes, drama in between all of that, but honestly, like, the magic always happens outside of that routine box. And as Emma Hogg was saying at the beginning, routine is a great sort of box, which can sort of make us feel like we have a purpose in this life and gives us a bit of security, so we're not sort of just wildly aimlessly, you know, going through this life. But at the same time, even when we do have those meltdowns where things don't go the way we plan, realize that there is always this opportunity that's opening up, that space opens up for wonderful, magical things to happen. So that's my 2 cents worth on routine. And no, Carla, I am not the most organized. You've just thrown this thing out there, and now I've got to live up to it, God damn it.
I think she's right, to be fair. But
no. It's all just, it looks like I am, because I'm really not, actually. And so, believe you me.
Don't feel like I need to follow Rosella around for a day in the life of.
Trust me, if I
put the car and just hide it.
You'll realize how unstructured my days are. I promise you that. Okay. I think we'll sign off, and for us, we'll stay on, but I mean, we'll close off the live stream. And thanks again to everyone who joined us, and hope to see you, well, to keep in touch, and hopefully to see all of us in person, like actually physically, because I'm kind of getting over this Zoom thing. But anyway, until we have to Zoom, we'll have to Zoom, and yeah, we'll keep in touch. So thanks again, and see you soon. Try and sign off now from here without imploding. Okay, thanks.
Okay, not live on Facebook.